sounds from the rhythm underground. Welcome to the We Love Guitar Nerds podcast, your place for all things guitar. We have your interviews, we have your lessons, your boomer discussions, and your verbal rabble-rousings. So please hit subscribe, share, and like to join our constantly growing musical community. Welcome to We Love Guitar Nerds. I'm here with Dave Rubin. Again, we're going to be talking about the blues side of jazz. And when we talk about the blues side of jazz, there's some people that think that jazz is one thing and blues is another. And it's like, well, we're going to clear this up today. That blues has its way of infiltrating on everything that is American music. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This is going to be free form. There's not we're going to overthink this, but we're just going to take it back to some of the roots. So how far did this goes back before the Civil War? The whole jazz and blues and the roots of it all goes back.
Oh, the roots
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's take it back to, let's take it back as far as we can. So we have the banjo was an African instrument.
The only one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are we going? Where that was one of the first rhythm instruments that we really used in America. Where do we go from here? Where does that lead us?
Well, a side note, and we've got a million of them.
Okay.
Passing tone, as it were, grace note. Apparently, and I kind of got this from some people who are really into banjo and the history of it.
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time, they were tuned much lower than what we think. So they were more probably tuned in what we would consider the guitar range. It's helpful to know that, I think, because to think of like a kind of plinky banjo as like being a blues instrument.
And it wasn't always a 5-string instrument.
Yeah, well, maybe 4 to begin with, even, and and the original ones, banjar seems to be the African term, banjar. Maybe it only had one string in Africa. Probably only had one string on a stick, and then you get into that whole diddly bow thing of rubbing a bone or a stone, which becomes the roots of slide guitar. It's all connected. But better yet.
Yeah.
Did you ever see Danny Gatton play?
Yes, I was 3 feet from Danny Gatton.
Did he do
Berkeley?
Wow.
It was just him and his bass player, and he played for was a half hour, 45 minutes, and it just like everything that I was into at that time, he was doing one step at a time.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yes, everything I wanted to be doing, he was doing. When I saw him. Anyway, we'll save that little story for another time.
Yeah.
Danny Gatton in the beer bottle. But so a good friend of mine, Ed Kamara, who used to be the blues archivist at Ole Miss, very well known blues and jazz rock too expert. He pointed out to me when we did a book together that around that time, Civil War kind of time, maybe before that, he made a point to answer your question there, that although there was all kinds of segregation besides slavery, but he was pointing out that there were musical get-togethers, what he would call maybe pre-hoedowns, pre-country music. Again, this stuff is all country blues. It's all there mixed in together.
Not the straight line.
Not really, and not so segregated that people would be, Black people and white people would be together hearing this music. So all this thing is being filtered through this African tradition of melodies. I'm going to say that anyway. The field hollers seem to be predecessors of not literally the predecessor of the blues scale or pentatonic scale. There's another digression I have to tell you about. But it seems to be they were singing, the slaves in the field. This is how they communicated instead of the drums, because the plantation owners wouldn't let them have drums. They knew they communicated that way.
Because they knew
But
they would rebel.
being resourceful folks as they were, even under the most horrid conditions, they communicated by singing in the field. And the plantations said, oh, that's great. They're singing. They're happy. They're doing their work and they're singing. Oh, well, they were singing okay. That's how they communicated across the fields. But the melodies and the scales that they were singing was like a blues scale, a minor pentatonic. So you have that going on before you have, I believe, much instrumental backing. And then I don't know when the harmonica comes in, before guitars, that's for sure. And I don't know, you know, and then well, that's a nice little thing there. You know, you hold that and
But that harmonica is from Germany, Switzerland?
Germany, yes.
Germany?
Yes.
So we have the banjo from Africa.
Right.
Harmonica from Germany.
Right.
Guitar,
and then a long
guitar forever. I don't.
Long history of guitars.
Yeah.
Or pre-guitars also. Also done a study of that. But
yeah,
to your point. So that takes us up to.
I think that's interesting to note that slaves were not allowed. They were not allowed to play drums.
Correct.
Because that was seen as insubordination, or that could inspire people to overtake their lord or whatever.
Yeah.
Slave driver.
Yeah. Okay. Revolt.
Yeah.
Rebel, revolt. Yeah.
So vocals and the work song kind of filled in the gap.
There you go.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And then we talked a little bit about the Civil War, how that's another thing that, like, drums were used to communicate from ridge to ridge of what was going on from one artillery to another. And I'm probably saying this wrong because I'm not a war historian, but it was a method of communication. It was a method of communication.
Right.
Okay. So we're taking this into what you were talking about, the pre-gospel, the white gospel?
Yeah, apparently this is pre-emancipation, pre-Civil War. There was something. There was music going on. There was religious music on the plantations that the white people sang, part of their religious observances, that is referred to as white gospel music because it was religious. I don't know the details of this. I've not studied it. But again, the slaves were exposed to this because they were there and you're hearing it. So you're getting big point here, as you again said about blues not being European or African. It's American. It's the two coming together.
It only happened in America.
Yeah. So they're hearing that European harmony, chord changes, because you don't have that in Africa before the blues. You've got, but you must clearly have melodies from their culture that become field hollers, and then the singing, and then you sing a line, and then you play the line, maybe on the banjo, and it's the same line, and it's what we would recognize as blues scale melodies.
Yes.
So
and I gotta imagine that I don't necessarily know that it was originated here, but like call and response all plays a role in this.
It definitely does.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know the exact earliest derivation.
Yeah, because that's also good. That's also in the church.
That's in the church.
And who knows where it started?
Yeah.
So,
right.
As Winton says, well, we don't know where the blues comes from. We just know that it arrived here perfectly. But I don't know that we know some more in that. But
yeah, we know some.
There's a lot we don't know.
We know some more of that. I would change arrived to created.
Yes.
Here perfectly. Did not arrive here perfectly.
Yes.
But maybe he just using that as a metaphor, just kind of arrived out of the, the exosphere
before written,
or something.
Yeah.
but it's not, I mean, that's a nice metaphor. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, yeah. And it wasn't a straight line.
It's not a straight line. It's not a straight line. But again, I would like to make the point because I think it's worth making, and I have, and you probably have too, Rod, that that's part of the beauty, and I mean beauty of the blues and related music, is that it is the result of the intermingling of two cultures, two races, if you want to say it that
At
way.
least.
It's all about what we're about, and it's a wonderful creation. Wonderful. It brings people together. Instead
Yes.
of separate, it brings them together, and then it's become worldwide because people of all cultures around the world, they all respond to it. They hear it and they love it.
Hmm.
It talks to them.
Yes.
Which I think, to me, I'm not the first one to say this, shuffle beat, that's your heartbeat. Long, short, long, short, long, short. That's how your heart beats. Not to get too metaphysical about this, but
Yeah. Yes. So this break. Okay. So we have field hollers. We had work songs. We have applying all those melodies. Those melodies make their way into uh, entertainment eventually, in like places like New Orleans, and like uh, we have Buddy Bolden, King Bolden. So King Bolden was one of he was like the story that I know of King Bolden, Buddy Bolden, was that Europeans came in and they listened to him play the trumpet, and they thought he had a tricked out trumpet because he was creating all these notes that European ears never heard before.
and apparently really loud, by the
Yeah, it's
way.
really loud, and it's like it was a different sense. It was a different vibe. It was a different thing, and they thought it was his instrument. It wasn't his approach. So, what do we know about Buddy Bolden?
Oh God, I've only been to New Orleans once, about 4 or 5 years ago, and there's a tour you can take. There's a very knowledgeable man who works for a newspaper there. I think he is a musician himself, and he does like the music tour. And we went to Buddy Bolden's house. It was like a pilgrimage. I was like, we are not
This is
worthy.
where it all began.
So we know that. We know he had mental problems, which finally ended up being institutionalized. And there are no recordings of Buddy Bolden. And he was playing in the 1890s and the 1910s and up almost to the 30s, and there's no recordings.
Yes. Well,
Really a shame. Really a shame.
Yeah. So he was one that inspired the next generation.
He's the first king, right?
He was
He's
the
the
first
first,
generation. He was the
first king.
mentor to Louis Armstrong and King Oliver.
Yeah.
And what would then, so when Buddy was doing his thing, it wasn't called jazz. There was no jazz. The name jazz came later. This is like turn of the century, early 1900s.
Right. Correct.
The sounds that he made only that were folklore, but it was a completely different enough approach. We're not going to forget Congo Square. Congo Square was another.
There. I was there.
Yep.
Still there.
Okay. They still call it Congo Square?
Well,
They should.
Historically it is. Yeah. I mean, there's a plaque there and the name is there, and
Okay, good.
it's just, it's there. They've preserved it.
It's the birth of
Like
cultures coming together.
Yeah.
And jamming on a Sunday afternoon.
Sundays, right.
And then the music that came from that is one of the things that inspired jazz.
Right.
So many other music, as I said, everything is not a straight line. It doesn't
No.
just inspire jazz.
No.
So now, what is W.C. Handy's role in all of this?
Well, the famous story, right? The famous story of W.C. Handy. First of all, he was a very schooled musician, classically trained, and he and his band, let's say late 1890s, they're playing like society functions, which means white people. They're playing for white people because they had gigs, because they could play the music that the white people wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And they got paid appropriately, one would hope. So, okay, so you have that. So that's W.C. Handy. At this point, he doesn't know anything else except that, by his own words. 1903, red letter date in the history of the blues. He's in a train station in Tutwiler, Mississippi. I've been there. There's a plaque where the train track was. There's a plaque. He's sitting there waiting for a train, and he hears an itinerant blues musician, though he doesn't know what that is, sitting there with playing slide guitar with a pocket knife on the street.
You by itinerant, you mean what?
Itinerant, he probably rambled around as he did, playing by himself, moving from place to place. We don't know where he lived. We don't know who he was.
Yeah.
And so Handy wrote about this. He said this is like the strangest music he ever heard. He kept singing a line where it's the two railroads. The Southern crossed the dog. I think that's what it is. That they call these two railroads. One was the Yellow Dog and one was the Southern. He said that was the line that he kept singing over and over again. And he said, and here's another whole topic. Handy said that he was sliding a knife on the strings in the manner of Hawaiian guitar.
Okay.
I wrote a whole essay on this for Guitar One magazine. What comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Hawaiian music, playing slide guitars, and the blues players hear it and adapt it to blues.
Hawaii was
first. Or
first.
Is it coming from the diddly bow in Africa, the single string with this bone or a stone being slid and then nailing the wire up to the side of the barn and doing the same thing here? So I don't know what comes first. But Handy said, because he had heard, people had heard Hawaiian music, and it made it to the mainland by then. And it was very popular. So he called it in the manner of Hawaiian music. So he does that. And the next, somewhat later, they're playing again. His group is playing. And when they take a break, this group of blues musicians comes in and plays while Handy's band is on break. And the people go wild and they're throwing money on the stage.
Yeah.
He sees this. Oh, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this? I'm missing out on something here. And simplifying the story a little bit, Memphis blues and of course St. Louis blues, and then he goes on to writing those down. I mean, he's kind of
taken what he remembers those sounds and songs to sound like.
He writes it down.
And important, like any composer taking.
He composes and writes it down. He's not the first to do it, though.
Yes.
He's not the first. There's a song called Baby Seals Blues, which is actually done by a white guy in Texas who heard a black man singing it, liked it. If I may digress for a second, I hate to have to say it like this, but we white folks, we hear the blues and we love it.
Yeah.
And we want to be a part of it. And we want to play it.
Yeah.
And she holding the guitar and my guitar is here.
Yeah.
So there's the W.C. Handy.
The W.C. Handy, this was like his first hits. His music was, why W.C. Handy is important is because his music went far and wide.
Really far.
And
he wrote it down.
Okay. He had hits.
He published it, yes.
Yes, he published it. And it was the thing that if you wanted to play with people, you had to learn this new song. It was like in our day, and I don't even know if this is your day, but like 10 years ago, you could not play Wagon Wheel. It wasn't people it was everybody wanted to hear it. This is before Darius Rucker did it, but it was that song that everybody wanted to hear. And if you wanted to jam with people and play with people, you would learn it, and it would not be a thing. It's not like there's no piece of sheet music in front of you. You learn how to play it, and it became a thing. Like, how do we vary this up? Because it was popular. It was what people were going crazy over. You tend to respond to what people go crazy over.
But by the way, in my day, it was House of the Rising Sun.
Same. Yeah. Oh, there's all kinds of examples.
Yeah.
Purple Haze.
Oh, well,
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah,
went on. Oh, for sure.
yeah.
Go.
So
Yeah.
standards. It
Yeah.
became the standard of the 2000 or 1910 to 15s, all that
Yeah.
teens.
Yeah. Especially St. Louis blues.
Yes. So this was the birth of kind of like, I don't say birth of this. These were Louis Armstrong was taken from this. Uh, King Oliver, Freddie Keppert, all these guys
Yeah.
had this in their stuff. Some of them heard King Bolden. Some
I
of them,
would think they did.
yeah, because they were.
I
He
would think
was,
they did.
yeah, he would march every time they had a parade. He was in the parade, and it was like he was the most famous musician of his time for a couple. I don't know how many years before he went off the rails. So taking this up to the swing era. So we're W.C. Handy, and we won't say he invented, but he popularized it certainly.
Well, he published it. He published the
He
music.
published
Yeah.
it. The 12
No
bar
doubt.
blues. The 12 bar blues form was in a song, and it was and so many other people, because the fact that everybody was going ape over it. You want to write that thing that people are going ape over. It's no different than today. But what is different, it was really cool. So this becomes the birth of a lot of the swing stuff. Okay, the whole swing movement, like the New Orleans version of swing.
Right.
And then so the first rhythm instruments of that, we go back to banjo.
It's banjo first. I'm trying to
But then
think
it's
of
probably a tenor banjo.
probably
Johnny
again
Kinsey.
over pitch.
Yeah.
Over pitch. Yeah.
You also mentioned that the original banjo was not as high an instrument.
That's what I'm told.
Yeah, it wasn't as high of an intro. It was more in line with the range of the guitar.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
Louis Armstrong, King Oliver, all the traditional, and even probably as it went to some of Chicago, banjo was probably still the preferred rhythm instrument in the 20s. Like Freddie Green was originally a banjo player.
All right.
Okay.
Well, so was Django Reinhardt, by the way.
Yeah, did not know that. Did not know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is for those who don't know, Louis Armstrong and blues, you can't separate Louis Armstrong from the blues.
I don't think so.
Okay, so the blues with Louis was like what I love about it, that it is melody, it is phrasing, it is bravado, it is character. All those things we attribute to our favorite. It wasn't just about all the notes. How fast can I play? That's I don't
Certainly not Lewis.
I don't
Yeah.
want to say that's a white thing, but
Another topic for another
another
time.
day. Yes. Okay, so now earliest blues guitar players that are jazz, like you were talking about 1920s with the some of the
Lonnie.
earliest
I would say Lonnie Johnson.
Lonnie Johnson.
had-
So who is
he had
Lonnie
a
Johnson?
One of the first to play really great solos.
Okay.
He's not the first to record. That's Sylvester Weaver, another one of my heroes in the early 20s.
Mhm.
With guitar blues. He's the first slide guitar by a black person. Anyway, they always point that out. I don't know if somebody white person.
How much of this was racism?
Well,
Well, you
yes.
understand the Dixieland Jazz Band that claims that they invented jazz.
They do.
Okay. And
They
it's like,
do.
okay, we're going to give the opportunities to the white musicians. That could have been
They did.
a thing.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
what happened. Yes.
So
They should have been recording Buddy Bolden. Instead, they're
yes,
recording. And those guys could play. Let's be fair here.
yeah,
They could play. They weren't bad musicians,
yeah,
but they're not the original.
yeah,
They're not the original.
yeah. That was yeah. Their thing was weird though. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's for another discussion. So okay, so Lonnie Johnson. So he played with all kinds of musicians, but
including Lewis.
yes, okay,
He's somewhere there, I think, in the hot sevens or hot fives.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
And then he did those great. If I digress for a second, when you mentioned Louis Armstrong, all your readers, your followers of the wonderful podcast you do, Rod, when they get done listening to this,
Yeah,
they have to go online, YouTube or Spotify, whatever, and listen to Louis' West End Blues.
yeah, oh yeah,
It is the benchmark of the 20th century.
oh yeah.
Listen to West End Blues and the solos that he's playing there. It's all you need to know. Right? So throw that.
How important was Louis Armstrong? As Duke Ellington said, I want a band full of Louis Armstrong. And that's a Duke Ellington, who is another icon. Yeah. I want everybody to play like Louis Armstrong, which meant with phrasing. In other words, the whole thing that Louis was as a musician. That inspired everybody for years and years to come, up probably till bebop.
Well, B.B. King,
yep,
name here, said to me, I'm going to get to what you just said there. When we were talking about guitar players and who was important to him and ones he thought were great, he said he thought that Lonnie Johnson was the most influential guitarist of the 20th century. And then other people talking about jazz say Louis Armstrong was the most influential jazz musician of the 20th century.
Yes. This is, I say this a lot, but it was the kind of thing is you don't have to like Louis Armstrong to be influenced by him. In other words, he reinvented everything. So if you're playing the music, there's some Louis in you. If you're thinking about phrasing, if you're thinking about playing the notes in a certain way, we thank Louis for that.
Right.
So this rhythm sections after Louis Armstrong and early swings. Fletcher, he played with Fletcher Henderson. He, as I said, Oliver, he had a bunch of his own different recordings that were ridiculously influential. He was the first to scat sing and play. He inspired a whole nother, like a couple years later, this is like the Count Basie and all the territory bands that are coming up throughout the South and the major cities. And so what do we know about any of that? So the first guitar players in that.
Well, this is a good time to mention Western swing music.
Okay.
See, it goes back again to people listening to music before the Civil War that was like pre-country music and pre-blues together. So Western swing it has its own history, and it's kind of going on at the same time as Kansas City jazz or early swing music. Talk about Count Basie and those people, right? So this thing about Western swing that we should mention is that from the beginning, they were into playing guitars, because the jazz bands were not so much.
Yeah. And
like you mentioned Freddie Green before, and you have to talk about Freddie Green, who in 40 years never took a solo.
Yeah.
He just played rhythm guitar and unamplified. Even after amplified guitars came in, he didn't play amplified.
Yeah.
But the guitar is not featured in those bands. But concurrent in the 30s is Western swing music. And they listened to Kansas City jazz. They already had their own thing going from country music, which was developing alongside blues, and they're influencing each other to a degree. They're playing guitars. Those, and they have
A
some.
lot of you say electric guitars because a lot of these
Yeah.
guys
Yes.
also um later on, some of these guys are like, I have electric mandolins, electric instruments in general
Yeah.
was a thing with them. It
Yeah.
wasn't just relegated to guitars, but
It
um,
absolutely was.
like the 4-string mandolin. I think might, and somebody's going to correct me. That seems like it has to be American. The 4-string electric mandolin because of the that country blues,
I think it has to be. Yeah.
Western swing.
Yeah. Somebody could correct us, but I think you're
Yeah.
right.
So okay, so now, yeah, we can't pass up Freddie Green. Freddie Green defined how the jazz guitar, rhythm guitar, was to be played. It's like important to note that a lot of these same rhythms are the Soldier's Joys of the 1800s are the same grooves, the same 2-beat grooves as swing would be built off of.
Right.
So that is kind of, this is kind of, and I'm not an authority on Freddie Green, but that's my,
That's the way I do it too.
yeah.
Big on those three note voicings. A lot of the 3-note voicings. Yeah.
And 2-note voicings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I played with a swing group, like traditional, I say traditional Count Basie era kind of thing, and she corrected me quickly. I was playing too much, but there's nuance and subtlety. But Freddie Green is hugely important. The
Yes.
guitar is a rhythm instrument in jazz and in blues. So that was, for those who are listening, what I'm playing is a blues. If you think blues doesn't belong in jazz, well, I'm sorry. 4 chord, back to 1, 4 chord, back to 1, 2 minor, 5, turn around. Now that is just one example of what Freddie Green do all day long.
It's a good one.
And the thing that all those bands did, they got a little more elaborate with their chording. They did not just play. There's things that I'm missing that is fine, but it's like jazz musicians would take chords and they would explore, what can we do with chords? What other things can we do with chords? So after so we're missing with like Nick Lucas, and there's a whole there's some of the guys of the late 20s, early 30s that
a lot of Eddie Lang.
Eddie Lang, that was the one I was thinking of. Nick Lucas and Eddie Lang, who were hugely cool, that don't get as much recognition as they deserve.
Right.
And this is pre Charlie Christian.
Yes.
Now Charlie Christian. Okay, so what do we think of Charlie Christian? What are our thoughts on Charlie Christian?
Well, you and I'm just, my Charlie Christian book, by the way, Play Like Charlie Christian, is in the process of being edited.
Okay.
A big thrill to do that book. Again, it's we can get really hung up. I admit to this, get really hung up on who's first, what's first, because we're trying to tell a story, and we're trying to tell a history, and it's got to have some kind of chronology. So Charlie Christian is not the first to play electric guitar. He's not first to record electric blues, a whole other conversation, by the way. But he realizes the potential of playing electric guitar in the bands he was in, and most famously, obviously, with Benny Goodman. So he gets it. He
Yeah.
gets it. Oh, you mean if I get this kind of volume and that kind of tone again, something
The first people to hear Charlie Christian play thought it was Lester Young. In other words, he was his heroes. I don't know that he had. I know, and we've talked about this before. He shared a guitar teacher with T-Bone Walker, which are the two most influential. And we say this a lot, but I think it's probably certainly there's something to be said for it. Two most influential guitar players of the 20th century, and they share the same guitar teacher, which was Ralph Bigfoot Chuck Hamilton, their guitar teacher. One went in one direction, one went in another direction. They're both performers, but I remember hearing, I forget who it was, but they said the first time I heard Charlie Christian, it sounded like somebody playing like Lester Young.
Good point.
But on this instrument that they never heard of before.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they could now compete with saxophones for solo space,
yes.
and because you could be heard.
Yes.
Could be heard, had the tone, had the sustain
Mm-hmm.
that not you could get acoustically.
Yes. So with Charlie Christian, the other thing, he brought with him the vocabulary of a saxophone player. That he sounded different than any guitar player that came before.
He did.
Yeah.
He absolutely did.
He was his own guy. Yeah. He was his own guy. And it's important in the blues, in our talk about the blues, that the things that make Charlie Christian essential, and somebody we're talking about 80 years later, is the fact that what makes him great is not just about quantifiable, he plays this fast. It is not about all the like the Herb Ellis quote, I thought I was better than Charlie Christian until I got it, until I woke up. Okay, and then I realized that he was somebody I needed to absolutely absorb. Okay, so in the blues, we have this tradition of singing and making our melodies singable, or in some way you can hear the melodies and you can hear the feelings and all that kind of stuff. Charlie Christian did that within a jazz guitar, building a jazz guitar kind of thing. It was not just about the speed. It was about phrasing. It was about imagination, but it was about, he defined what everybody, all his mentors, which were ridiculously numerous: Wes Montgomery, Barney Kessel, Herb Ellis. Joe Pass says he wasn't a Charlie Christian, but doesn't matter, because I hear what Joe Pass, I hear what some of what Joe Pass plays, and it's absolutely Charlie Christian.
Yeah.
He's not even aware of it.
He's not even aware of it.
Yeah. So Jim Hall, all of them, Tal Farlow, every major Charlie Christian was the root of it. So what do you know about? I know you have a book coming out, so I'm going to shut up because you have a.
No, okay.
What have you studied?
That's okay. You've hit it on the head. Really, that you've hit his influences. Mm-hmm. He's talking about something that just arrives. He seems to come out of nowhere.
Yeah,
it's not quite true, but he doesn't. He wasn't really a known quantity before Benny Goodman, and I think it was John Hammond Sr.
John Hammond, yeah,
who
discovered
told
him.
Benny, you've got to hear this guy. You know, he heard him playing Southwest, but I don't think he had recorded. I don't remember every bit of the biography. I actually did a book a few years ago, and it's just coming out. Excuse me. I don't believe he'd recorded, but he had played.
Yeah,
he'd been playing, so people heard him, and John Hammond Sr. heard him and suggested him, and Benny, who I think sometimes doesn't get the credit that he should get in a lot of ways, because I guess he was kind of a taciturn personality, as many band leaders often are, down to James Brown and on and on. But just saying that, had to have his arm twisted a little bit, and actually had to be tricked into getting Christian to sit in one night.
Yeah.
And
Rose Room,
played a famous standard at that time, Rose Room, which is in my book. And Benny, again, for as prickly as he could probably be personality wise, was not stupid, and he knew a great musician when he heard one. And he's in the band. And
from the time Rose Room. So Rose Room was it wasn't an easy song at the time.
no,
Benny said, this is really kind of like, this is your audition, boy.
yeah. Let's hear you play Rose Room.
Yeah.
Smart. Oh, and smart. Play Rose Room.
That was actually one of the songs that Charlie did with his guitar teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So he nailed it.
And Benny probably had to stop him from playing too many choruses, because he wouldn't. He could play one after another. But anyway. Yeah. So it was that kind of thing. He was a great rhythm player too, obviously, and he played those unison lines and harmony lines with Lionel Hampton, who was in the playing vibes at that time, not drums with Benny. And it's just amazing to hear, when one would follow the other at the soloing, because Benny would arrange the songs that way, like everybody would get their couple of choruses, but it usually was one right after the other. And amazing to see how, of course, they all did it. They all picked up on what was played before them, but Christian was particularly good at it. But talk about sense of swing and phrasing.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
I mean, one would think, now I don't remember this, and somebody can correct me again, you would think that to draw some lines, there's some straight lines we can do. You can go like this. He must have heard Armstrong. One would think besides
of course,
besides Lester Young. Yeah. He heard all of those guys. Yeah.
I think the rhythm, somebody once said that Louis Armstrong invented timing.
Great quote.
He invented modern time. Louis Armstrong's. So like a lot of Charlie Christian, his deal in the blues, like using that big beat, the swing. I'm simplifying it, but everything was within the pocket. Everything was everything was within the pocket, and he would elaborate. And a big thing also within his playing over the blues, like when we think about the blues as like you and I both kind of came up being introduced by the blues, I think through rock and roll.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what we're taught when we first start off is that minor pentatonic scale that the slaves sang and all that.
Right.
So the swing guys were really into the chord tones. They were really into the chord tones, like
arpeggios and such. Right.
Okay, so so the chord tones and that Louis Armstrong, you gotta that big stomp, whatever you call that. So so that is I just want to encourage people to listen to that. That's some of the things that you listen to. Once you understand what is going on, it makes it more enjoyable, and it's touchable.
It does.
We can do this. We can do this. We can take some of these things. You don't have to jump full into the jazz and the blues, but that I don't necessarily know that that stops at jazz. So, so,
No,
af- so
not at all. And to elaborate a little, Rod, on what you just said about growing up on rock and roll as the introduction into the blues, because so much of it is based on the blues and 12-bar blues, of course, especially 50s rock and roll and 60s too. You know, after that part where that's kind of percolating in me, and I'm starting to play the guitar, and then hearing some Count Basie, the most bluesy numbers of all, the real ones that are closest to 12 bar or are 12-bar blues, and hearing them after, you know, I've kind of got a little push from rock and roll anyway, and now I'm hearing that because I didn't know what jazz was about at that point. That seemed something foreign to me, and then all of a sudden I said, "Oh wait, that sounds, oh yeah, that sounds like the blues. Oh, I get it, and then of course
it's the
you go back.
wellspring in which everything.
Yes,
Jimmy
sure,
Rogers,
everything,
everything.
everything touches all music in some way. Popular
Yeah.
American, in some way. No, who would deny? You know.
So now Charlie Christian, he's also the father, and I think we've said this, of everybody who came back, because he had a really, really short career. Because
Really,
he died.
really short. Really short. 41, 42,
Yeah.
1940, when he was in his 40s. I guess tuberculosis, very sad. He only had this like maybe 3 years with Goodman, if that. And,
Yeah, he was
and
really
that
young.
pretty much it. Little tidbit, just because I mentioned Django before, which we've got to do a
Yeah,
Django podcast
absolutely.
at some point. I just finished the proof of a Django, well, a gypsy jazz book that I co-authored with somebody who's a real expert. I am not. I can't play it, that music. I understand it,
Yeah,
but I know how to do a book on it, and I just did it with another person.
yeah,
And in my research and in my introduction and my bio that I wrote for the book, besides the guitarist who did the bulk of the writing, apparently Benny, who did not like the guitar at first, and definitely didn't like the electric guitar when he first heard it, because he thought it was too loud and harsh. Of course, Christian changed his mind after Christian died, and he becomes aware of Django, and he's in Europe. He wanted Django to join his band. Can you imagine?
yeah.
And
I never heard
Django,
this.
yes, he wanted Django, and they were in Paris or London at the same time, and he wanted Django to come by. And this is post World War II, just post World War II. And he wants him to come by and play. And Django, who, if you know anything about him, rock stars got nothing on him.
Yeah,
Let me tell you, he lived the life he wanted to lead, and he was, to say it politely, a real screw up with his career.
okay.
And he never showed up. He never showed up. You know, he came to America. He played with Ellington for a while. They had met in Paris, and I think Duke has to take a little bit of blame here that he didn't rehearse enough with Django, and the communication, you know, language wise, was really bad. And the keys weren't right for Django, and he had to really kind of play without any rehearsal. He still obviously blew everybody away. But the idea of that, what Django could have been playing with Benny Goodman and Duke Ellington. I mean, he did play, and there's some recordings.
Yeah,
Fascinating. Anyway,
those recordings exist.
they do exist. The
I
ones
never,
with that
I never knew this.
do exist. And again, he didn't like. Here's something. Again, if I can just go down that path a little bit, because we are talking about electric guitars here too. First of all, he didn't bring a guitar with him, Django, because he thought he was so famous, the manufacturers were going to just bestow all these guitars on him, so he didn't have to bring his Macaferry. He brings no guitar. Les Paul gets ES 300 for him because he thinks he'll like that. He hated it.
Of course.
It was big, bulky, and heavy, and he's used to playing that light microphone. He hated it.
Yeah.
But eventually, and I was going to drop another name here. Jeff Beck is a big Django fan, and I was interviewing him once, and we got talking about him. And I said to him that George Benson, who also was talking to me about Django once in an interview, said that Django didn't like the electric guitar. He didn't have a feel for it because he was used to playing acoustic and picking really hard, and he never did anything. I'm telling this to Jeff Beck, and Jeff Beck says, "Oh, that's not quite true. That's not true. There's a couple records you have to look for. Some of the last things that Django did in the last 40s and the early 50s, where he's playing electric, and he's playing because he got into bebop, and he's playing some pre-bebop. I just thought I would mention that anyway.
That exists as well.
Bit of a digression.
I knew he went to electric. I knew that.
He did, and he got used to it. There's actually some YouTube videos of him playing electric. You can hear him doing it. Of course, play after he got into it. Of course, he played wonderfully.
Yeah.
He played wonderfully.
Yeah. In
between playing the billiards and out fishing, which he really would rather be doing than practicing the guitar.
Okay.
Of course, he didn't have to practice it after all.
So
anyway.
note that we I know this is an obvious thing for us, but Django, he played guitar with two fingers.
The soloing was, yeah.
The soloing was.
These fingers are fused together.
Yeah.
So he can record kind of bar sort of thing, but all the solo stuff is with two fingers. And talk about playing fast.
Yep. Yeah. So he would go on to inspire people like Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. When Tony Iommi
there you go.
He lost these two fingers.
Right.
In a factory accident.
Right.
His boss came in and played him Django Reinhardt because Tony was considering, I can't play music anymore.
Right.
This is like in the mid 60s.
Right.
Can't play anymore. And then he heard Django, and that really did something to him. So the reach is big, whether we hear the influence or not.
Very big. That's true.
So jazz blues, we get somebody like Wes Montgomery is in the Charlie Christian. Wes Montgomery's first gigs were just copying Charlie Christian's solos note for note, which is kind of weird because he's such a great improviser.
Yeah, really. Oh God, yes.
Yeah, but he got his start by taking on Charlie Christian, huh?
Yeah, I never heard that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how he got his start. Like, he didn't start playing guitar till he was like 20, 21. And what he would do is he just spend all his time learning Charlie Christian guitar solos. And that's where it started. And his first gigs, as I said, were just playing. I don't even know how that happens. Like, who are you going to play just, it's like somebody else's solos to? I guess there was a gig that, I don't know how that happens, but that's how he got to start.
Unfortunately, I'd love to do a book or some research on him sometime. I don't know that. I don't know his history real well. I know his music. I don't know his history real well.
Yes. So he's an Indianapolis guitar player.
Right.
Never used a pick because he was always playing at night. Pick was louder. He used his thumb because his kids were in bed. So his thing for our audience, when we say something like Wes Montgomery, one of the cliche things is he played with his thumb.
Right.
That's what he played with, and he played with octaves. A lot. He didn't just play with octaves.
No.
He would do solos of single note line solos. He would do octave lines.
Oh,
he would
fantastic.
do chord stuff. So in the listening room, say something like The Thumb by Wes Montgomery. There's all kinds of Blue Monk, uh, all kinds of different songs we could check out. I know he did an album with Milt Jackson, Bags Groove.
Right.
Okay, so all of
And
these,
Jimmy,
every
and
one
Jimmy
of these,
Smith,
huh?
the ones with Jimmy Smith, the great albums with
Oh
Jimmy Smith.
yes, yes.
Also,
So
that I
Oregon,
listen-
not
yeah.
yeah, he did a bunch of stuff with different.
Mm.
All the great jazz guitar players played with organ players
Yeah.
at some point in their career. George
Right.
Benson,
Yeah. Jack stuff. Right.
Grant Green.
Grant Green.
Okay,
I
so
love
Grant,
that.
yeah, he is.
Now, pardon me for interrupting, Rod, but that brings us back. Now you're back in our topic again,
Mhm.
because those organ groups, and I love all that stuff. Jimmy Smith I saw him many times, and spoke with him briefly once here in New York. But Jimmy Smith and McDuff. You can go on who Benson played with. Those groups, talking about jazz and blues, all of those groups played blues and jazz standards.
Mhm.
Richard Groove Holmes would play Misty, a swing version of Misty, by the way, that I show my students and play sometimes myself. They all had, and Smith for sure. Midnight Special, one of his songs. They all played blues and jazz, and so now we're into the 60s now, and 70s even with that. So we're back to where we started today, and they all have guitar players in the band, right?
And it isn't as easy as saying we're just playing jazz. It's blues, it's jazz, it's soul, it's everything. Like everything we're talking about, there is no straight line that this is all we listen to. We only listen, but jazz, the blues is kind of like the template that everything gets attached to.
Good word.
By this point, okay. But like the Jimmy Smith albums of the late '60s, early '70s, the Kenny Burrell.
With Kenny Burrell.
Then there's Kenny Burrell that is played with every major guy, every major artist who was the post Charlie Christian. They went through one of these.
Yes.
One of these organ, like organ trios, and that's how they learn. They cut their teeth, so to speak.
Yeah. And a lot of blues, and Burrell certainly can play the blues. We know that.
Yes, that's what he did. Yeah, that's one of the things. He's kind of like my gateway jazz guitar player, Kenny Burrell.
For me too.
Yeah. Okay, because now he can play anything, but the albums that like Chetlin's Concarney and
for sure.
Okay, so those kinds of things. He sounded to my ears kind of like a rock guy, a jazz guy that understood some rock sensibility.
That too.
Then
he played on sessions. He played on some pop sessions in New York in the 50s.
Yeah,
Burrell. So he played on some rock and roll classics in the 50s.
Getting into this for the first time, you could check out Kenny Burrell's stuff.
Oh, for
Midnight Blue album.
Oh,
there's probably a lot of them, but Midnight Blue. You don't need every album. Just check out Midnight Blue.
Midnight Blue will do it. Midnight Blue will do it.
And he did a lot of the pentatonic runs, and it's like these are the people that inspired like later generations of blues artists like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stevie Ray Vaughan was a mix mash of everybody as well. Kenny Burrell and Wes Montgomery are in that list.
They are.
Okay. So
and even Otis Rush mentioned Kenny Burrell. Okay. I interviewed Otis a couple of times, and he mentioned how he was a big fan of Kenny Burrell.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So jazz blues, as far as the chord changes goes, they branch out. They branch out. This should be a lesson that this should be we will inspire for a lesson in this. How does jazz blues differ? Okay. It branches out. You want to try checking out triads. You want to listen to, go back in history, listen to the guys that had done it. Listen to guys like Herb Ellis, Wes Montgomery, all the guys we mentioned, like even Joe Pass. Joe Pass we haven't discussed. What do we know about? Did you ever interview Joe Pass?
Unfortunately not, though. I saw him a couple of times, including him playing solo once at a small club.
Okay.
Not far from where I live. And I love those solo albums that he did, the virtuoso albums,
Yes.
where it's just playing.
Yep.
And he'd play a whole 12-bar chorus just with single notes.
Yeah.
Just with single notes, and you could hear every change.
Yeah.
Big into blues. Big.
Well, Joe Pass says whenever he composes, it's always the blues. Whenever he writes his own song,
there you go.
Whenever he writes his own song, it's always the blues. But some of his greatest stuff, Blues in G. My favorite. It's also it's all based on taste, but it's like Joe Pass. He can play in any setting, but it's one of the things that we know about Joe is he made, like, I kind of liken him to like the Segovia of jazz guitar, where what Segovia tried to do is put the guitar into into an orchestra, into a guitar. Take that mindset and really develop it. With that said, if you're being a classically minded musician, you memorize your piece. With Segovia, Joe Pass, being a jazz-minded musician, he's improvising. And what he would also do is he would intertwine bass, chord changes, melody, harmonies, crazy chord solo-y, all in the same 12-bar chorus.
Yes.
So
yes, sounding.
Yes. So now the thing of it is, just experience some of this. You don't have to be Joe Pass is humbling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In other words, I think when I say this, I think a lot of people fear what we're talking about because they think they have to be. They think they have to be the pro, or they think they have to be as great as. No, he's a giant. But you can take from him, just as the people that we're all talking about, is they took from their heroes. They probably weren't masters. Most of the people we're talking about were humble about their abilities, because they knew, like Les Paul. Les Paul knew that no matter how good I think I am, I know there's a ton of stuff. He always said that just when I think I got it, there's more to learn.
Good quote.
So
Hear that?
yeah. So do not fear. Do not fear. Take what you can. Bass line. And these are shell voicings. We start with shell voicings and bass line, and I as I said, I feel a lesson coming on that will bring to the world.
I like
just getting started with it and not fearing it. That's the big thing about music. You don't have to be you don't have to be just like Joe Pass in order to get something from him, or Lewis or anything.
So here, you'll like this little quote. When I saw him play solo and I was sitting right in front of him, he told a little anecdote in between one of the songs. He said he was being interviewed by a music journalist one time, and the journalist says to him, "So Joe, how does it feel to have mastered the guitar?" And Pass, as he's telling this, he sort of pauses. He said, I looked at the guy and said, "Mastered the guitar? Nobody masters this instrument.
Yes.
This is type one. This is Joe Pass. If we could say anybody,
really, the only person on this earth that has that kind of arrogance was Jaco Pastorius.
Oh, well, that's another story.
Yeah. But I'm saying as I said, most of the people that we're talking about, they see themselves in a line that I still have a lot to learn. So, but I will
Yeah.
not fear.
That's a good quote to remember. That's
Yeah.
a good.
Take what you can and then add it to what you already have and create your own mix.
Yeah.
But the blues, bringing the blues into it, the blues is a is the adhesive that brings so many of these things together. We've talked about how it is born in America. Blues guitar, blues everything is born in America, taking strands from this culture and that culture, Africa, Europe, the islands, the some of the islands, Hawaii. We talked about strands from everything, but it came together in America in a not so in a jagged, curvy line that is like what we can all aspire for on our instruments. Doesn't have to be.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be like first there's this, then there's this, then there's this. You know,
Enough.
yeah. All right. So
Yeah.
other things we were lastly through the blues, all these instruments that this comes from elements of this comes from Spain, elements come from Europe. The saxophone redefined because of the blues and jazz. Harmonica was a German instrument.
Right.
Banjo from Africa. So it's all these things coming together. All these things coming together. So interesting. There's probably 1,000 discussions we can get into from here, but we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Dave Rubin.
We probably will. Thank you,
we will.
Ron.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
I learn a lot when we talk too, and I welcome it.
This is church for me. Thank you. We love Guitar Nerds community. Thank you, Dave Rubin. Thank you. We love the guitar blues. Do it, jazz. Just give it a shot. Just give it a shot. Don't be fearful. Don't be fearful. You don't have to be perfect. Just learn some stuff. See ya.